Welcome to Big Homeopathy. I'm your host, Sarah Thompson. Hi, welcome to Big Homeopathy with your host, the Big Homeopath, Sarah Thompson. So there's been some stuff coming up in the news that I thought I should comment on, and I'm going to revisit something that I wrote about a couple of months ago but didn't make a video about. I don't intend on Big Homeopathy to get into a discussion of vaccines and homeopathy, but there's something that came on my radar when my kids were little, and probably before, but I wasn't as aware of it. The idea that if someone does not choose to pursue conventional allopathic forms of treatment and prevention, that they are not doing anything. And that's really not true. My experience is really the opposite, that people who take a holistic view of health and disease work very hard to identify lifestyle approaches, including nutrition and exercise, to support themselves and not get sick, and then to identify natural methods for dealing with sickness and disease. And it's actually the people who don't do anything, who don't think about these things, that then panic when something happens. And for me, homeopathy has given me such a sense of security, because I can use it with my family for things that would have been scary before, for concussions, for burns, for influenza, for ulcerative stomach pains. I mean, really some big stuff that it makes me feel like I'm very empowered. But the disease I want to talk about, the diagnosis I want to talk about today, is called HPV, the human papillomavirus, because there is a vaccine for that is being mandated for use in children, and there's some homeopathic research that relates to that gives some hope for people. I have a personal story with HPV. When I was in my early 20s, I had a pap smear and that showed abnormal squamous cells, which is an indication to the doctors of the presence of HPV. And so they recommended a colposcopy and a loop excision called a LEAP, which is an extremely unpleasant and invasive procedure. And I had a lot of after effects from it, pain and recurrent infections, which the doctors would never acknowledge were connected. But they started after that, and they did not resolve until I got pregnant with my first child, because apparently pregnancy is a cure-all for all sorts of weird things, hormonal imbalances, ever getting a night's sleep, that sort of thing. So anyway, I have some experience with HPV, and I understand why when parents read, oh my God, HPV is the #1 sexually transmitted disease in the country, that they want to rush out and get this vaccine for their kids. And so it's great to know that there is this new homeopathic preparation that's been studied called 2LPAPI, that resolves HPV in a large number of cases. Now, it's true that HPV will resolve on its own in a large number of cases, which is something that no one told me, and I wish I had known that. But then you wouldn't expect to see a difference with the placebo, and you really do in this case. So I want to cite that research here. And it's from the Advances in Infectious Disease journal, called Efficacy of 2LPAPI, a microimmunotherapy drug in patients with high-risk papilloma genital infection. And we're going to use puppies today. Here are your puppies. So here are the numbers that in the homeopathic group, HR-HPV resolved in 78% of the patients taking the medicine versus 44% of the control. And in patients over 25, those clearance rates were 81.3% versus 20% in the control group. So there are ways in which this is homeopathy and ways in which it's not. The substance was prepared homeopathically consistent with aphorism 128 of the 6th edition of the Organon. Interleukin, interferon, RNA, cyclosporine, and specific nucleic acid were prepared by dilution and succussion, put on globules, and administered under the tongue for a period of 6 months. But this is not a substance that has been a remedy that has been proven, which in a situation like HPV, where you don't have symptoms that a patient could tell you, it's an interesting problem. But I'm sure these patients had other symptoms that would have been useful for a homeopath to know, and this was not individualized care. So I think that this is a homeopathically prepared substance. It's not homeopathic treatment, but it's still good news because, first of all, it demonstrates that there is support for preparing a substance with succussion and dilution, but more importantly, there are positive patient outcomes, and that's big news because this is big homeopathy, and it's going to be huge. See you next week.